Of some of these Triticale varieties here with us, which it's always so much fun to hear these people talk about their varieties because it's like their children. They're talking about their children's accomplishments and achievements, and it feels very similar. Esri wanted me to remind you guys that she does have some pamphlets on Seacan's varieties back at the tent there, so come find any of these people that have spoke today and get some information from them if you'd like, and they can follow up with you as well. I'm excited about the Sunbeam, but let's talk about both of these varieties here, Mazen.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Mazen. I'm the already John mentioned about our new name, working with WCI as Triticale breeder. Sunbeams has talking about its parents is Tyndall is you know the old varieties released by Alberta Agriculture maybe 15-20 years ago, well adapted to Alberta. And we made cross with really high yielding grain line from Simit. At that time we had a collaboration with them. So the target was kind of in the co-op trial, and if you look at the history, Brevis, the old lines was always like the best for grain yield, and that was always my target. And Sunbeam was the first line who hit and broke that record. So it's 6% higher than Brevis for grain yield and 6% over pronghorn. Again, it's well known for as a forage, Triticale. Both are owned lines. Not only about that, but the other good traits about this line is there is kind of tremendous improvement for grain quality, like the hectoliter weight and the kernel size. They are almost like Brevis. And the other good thing about this line is really suitable for many forage uses, whether it's forage, silage, other things. In terms of disease, it has a low ergot infection, lower than all the Triticale chicks, and also there is a quite significant improvement for Physiarum head blight. The disease committee at the PGDC rated it as between MR and I. So that's kind of really perfect lines. And I don't know if, Greg, you sprayed PGR, but for Triticale, I always recommend don't worry, because really in our new Triticale lines, there is no lodging at all, zero lodging. If there is any problem with lodging, that line will be discarded. The other line I have, do you want to say a few things? I don't know what the performance of at your farm.
Yeah, I can talk after you talk about this one. Go ahead. Yeah.
This line is a new line, and I asked Greg to grow it because it has a story. This is the first line actually has bread wheat in it. So that part of our developing germoplasm in our breeding program. So I have two crosses. One of them Tyndall with this like the same parents, almost like the same parents of T293. On the other side, I made cross between one of those Simit lines resistant to Fusarium head blight, and I cross it with another line from Simit. So then what we call it double cross or top cross, I cross both of them together. So for parents, the cross was made 2012, so it's almost like 12 years now. This is the second year of the co-op this year, and based on the data I have, first of all, it's I got the high grain yield from the Simit lines, reduced ons from the Tyndall, grain quality also excellent, suitable for swath grazing, and I'm targeting, it's a little bit shorter than the other lines, I'm targeting actually the irrigated area, and even though like it's at Lacombe now under dryland, it's doing great. The head size is great. So, and also the first line, actually I got probably this trait from the wheat. It rated between R and MR at the first year Fusarium head blight under both locations. So that's kind of our next target. Maybe we need another 2 years to register this line. Hopefully it's going to be really successful line for the irrigated area. Yeah.
Any questions for Mazen around? Can you explain? Not everyone knows what a triticale is. How is trit created in general originally?
The origin of triticale, if I explain it in simple way, it's a nice blend between durum wheat and rye. It's not like bread wheat, durum wheat and rye. So the target was to extract those good traits, the ability to grow under harsh environment from the rye, and also the quality from durum wheat. So we have both of them. But in our way to improve the triticale, because we have really limited germplasm around the world. So one thing, like 10% of my breeding program, I make cross now with bread wheat, and I'm not looking to make it like milling triticale. I'm make crosses with like soft white and maybe CPS, general purpose wheat, because I need yield, I need earliness, fusarium head blight, and this year we made the first cross between our, like one of them, this line, with another line from Curtis Bozaniak, who has R for fusarium head blight. That's kind of our target. So it's crossable with wheat. And also the other good thing about triticale, I make crosses between the winter. You will see winter over there, and I make cross between winter and spring, and then back cross to spring, because I want keep the spring type in my triticale. So that's the story. If you have a chance this year to attend our field day with AgSmarts at Olds, we will serve cookies and bread made out of triticale flour.
And that's next week.
Yeah, that's next week. So triticale it's not only feed and forage, but some people like rye bread, so why triticale? Triticale is similar to rye, and it has really some advantages if people don't like high content of gluten. I don't say it's gluten free, but it's different kind of gluten and low gluten. Yeah.
So is falling number not as critical anymore? Like what happened to Ultima, the variety?
That's a very old. Yeah, the falling number in triticale is gonna be maybe the maximum is 160. So it's you can compare it with the milling glass wheat, like hard red or even CPS. Yeah.
That's a great
Still, when you make a dough out of it, it's really weak. So, but for cookies, for certain things, it has really, certain flavor, and yeah.
What's the grain protein content?
Maximum 12. Yeah. Usually, like the one I made bread and cookies is like 10. It's starchy. It's like more.
Yeah.
If you want to compare it, you have to compare it with soft white wheat, general purpose wheat. Yeah, those kind. Yeah. Questions?
Greg, in terms of comparing the forage yield, silage yield compared to soft white, what would be?
We are trying to maintain. It's not like higher than those tall varieties, but I should say, like this line is, I believe, 5% over Taza. Taza, our forage, and it's tall. It has a lodging problem, but it's this one shorter, because actually we are focusing on we are reducing the height, plant height, but actually look at the heads. It's really big heads, highly, like fertility is high. So in this case, we are maintaining the same level of dry matter yield, but there is significant improvement in forage quality. So those lines have higher digestibility than the old variety of triticale. All the chicks, pronghorn, Taza, and yeah.
Thank you, Mazen. Feel free to corner him, ask some questions on Trit. From our sales perspective, I would say, and I don't know when this is officially launching yet. I'm kind of hoping this fall, but we'll have to talk to. that was something I was bugging Jeff about, so we'll see. But from our perspective, if you're growing soft wheat as a forage, it's probably worth checking out a Triticale as an alternative to that forage. It has maybe a little bit more drought tolerance or stress tolerance, and maybe spreads your risk a little bit, and your silage timing a little bit. It might be a little earlier. Would you say it's earlier, Blair, versus the soft wheats, or no? A little later? Okay, so I guess very variety dependent as well. But typically you're taking these at more of a milk stage than a dough stage. To a dough? Okay, milk to a dough. Okay, sounds good. And then from a milling standpoint, we don't have too many customers that are harvesting them for grain. I think you could, but who are you selling it to? So there maybe is a little bit of a market, but not a big one. But typically if there's someone that's buying rye for feed or potentially rye for milling or distilling, they might be interested in a Triticale as well. So pretty niche market though. So talk to people you're selling other things to see if they're interested. Did I miss anything on these kind of ones, Blair? Okay. Yeah, so I'm kind of hoping we can sell this one this winter, but I'm not 100% sure, so. All right, Racy. So he gets the award for the longest distance traveled. How many miles? 4,000 miles or? 1,557. I was way off. So Racy is one of the people that is with Triticale, the seed company out of the States that does a lot with Triticale. So I'll let you introduce yourself and talk a little bit. So I think all the rest of these varieties are yours, actually. So what I have to say about these plots here. So we've got Surge here and Surge here. We did 2 different plant stands because we had customers that were like, oh, I only want 20 plants or 25 or 30. And it's like, okay, well, what's the right plant stand? And Racy, I think, would maybe lean towards a little lower side for seed production and higher for forage production. I like high plant stands no matter what it is, and I just want to PGR the heck out of it. But so for seed production anyways. And so we've got 25 plants per square foot and 40 plants per square foot. And there's some lodging differences in there with just the 1 PGR. So, Racy, take it away. Introduce yourself.
Well, it's a pleasure to come all the way from Texas via airplane. I thought about driving it just so I could see some extra country, and I think I'll pass. I'm the head plant breeder for Triticale. Triticale we're probably around the neighborhood of about 42 years old. The company got started specifically in California, working on Triticale and in that soft dough, high lagoon water, high irrigation type Triticale environment. Hence the name Triticale. That's where our name comes from. Triticale, California. Because Caltrit sounded dumber. I don't know. But that's where we kind of get our name, and in the U.S. We're basically the market leader in the U.S. and it's mainly because we've focused on Triticale and specifically on the forage side for so long. You talk a little bit about the seed side. I'm not going to talk much about seed because we're always forage first. We take seed production. I do plots for seed production just to make sure we have enough production of seed to move the variety along. I'm not really looking for the big massive seed yielders. Again, we want to improve seed yield every time I develop a variety. That is a goal, but I'm not going to focus on it as my number 1 trait. So it's about biomass at first. So when we're long before I was with the company, they developed a onless trait, and the onless trait was not the same as the onless, or is onless the right term, or y'all use beardless?
Yeah, onless. Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes I say onless and they're like, what is that? Beardless. So the onless trait in Triticale is not the same as the onless trait in wheat. And what we see in wheat is a lot of the onless wheats will have a apically onletted. So at the very tip of the head, you'll see a little bitty short on, and then you might see occasionally an overexpression in some heat environments where you'll see a smaller on down below as you move down through the head. But if you look at our Triticale, this onless trait is completely onless from top to bottom throughout the entire process of development. We do have certain varieties that are on-leaded, so in between that, something's got a shorter on. We will see some overexpression of that on in a high heat, or drought type environment, and you actually will see that on become a little bit longer. But if it's on-list, like this particular variety to my right, it will stay on-list throughout the entire development phases. So moving forward, we were looking at the onless trait. The onless trait had a couple of things wrong with it. It had a yield drag, and the yield drag was somehow genetically linked. We couldn't figure out what it was linked to, but we was trying to figure out where we were losing all our yield on the onless ones compared to our fully on varieties. And what I figured out, and I spent a lot of time looking at this at the first of my career when I took over, but what I figured out was the best I could tell was the onless trait was linked to number of tillers per plant, not necessarily the architecture of the plant, the size, the leaf structure, any of that. So what I figured out was the ones that had the true onless trait were directly linked to having a lot less tillers per plant, and that was pretty much correlated throughout all of our varieties when we're starting to look at the onless trait. So then I had to go take a hypothetical genetic hammer and try to break those linkages to increase tillering. It was the only way we were going to get to where we had the onless trait in a variety that could have high biomass yield and seed yield. So we went through the process, and Surge was probably one of the ones that I saw a certain amount of percentage of improvement. But currently I have a variety I just released this year in the States that has about 25% more tillers than Surge, and it's truly onless. It's an incredible variety. And so I kind of start developing genetic pools to try to put all that together so I can continue to develop high yielding varieties with the onless trait. So there's kind of the journey of Triticale. As we talk about these varieties, Surge is a spring variety. We call it in these states facultative. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but we call it facultative, and really it doesn't need to be grown in a fall planted environment much. I wouldn't say up here at all. That's just my personal opinion. Now, if you're planning to get away with it, good job. But basically, when we start looking at our trits are they're really weird when you start messing genetically. And we have another trit breeder here that can attest to how weird Triticale is to work with. And every time you think you got something figured out, it'll punch you in the face. And you got to kind of go back to the drawing board. But a lot of our varieties, they're considered certain varieties are considered facultative. What that basically means is there's a vernalization requirement, or the length of cold that it has to be exposed to during the vegetative stage to go and develop to go into reproductive stage to bolt. Lots of crops have to have vernalization requirements. You got probably not up here. Y'all probably don't have pecans up here, but apples and peaches and things of that have a vernalization requirement. Winter wheat has a vernalization requirement, but you don't ever worry about vernalization because you're always planting it in the winter like you're supposed to. But what we figured out was some of the Triticales had some really high cold tolerances with almost zero no vernalization requirements. So those become grouped together as facultative. So what that means from a production standpoint is you can plant it in the fall and grow it all the way through fall, go into the spring and harvest it. You can also turn around and plant that exact same variety in the springtime, give it 90 to 120 days, whatever the growing season is for you, and then harvest that variety as well at the same time. So you can grow it in both seasons. Flex actually is not planted here. We do have a hybrid Flex, but Flex is probably our number one facultative variety because we do plant it up here in Canada. It's been planted the last 3 years, and it's fall planted, and they've had a pretty good success rate with it. I have seen Surge survive fall planted only at about a 60% rate. That right there tells me that's too low to recommend it as a fall planted. And I was surprised about that. It should have died completely. But I think with the amount of snow cover, certain times of year, you kind of help it to get those really hard blasts of cold air on top of it. But anyhow, so Surge is is probably our #1 spring planted variety. It is truly awnless. It has higher tillering than most of our early awnless varieties. It does have a trait when we're looking at quality, and we're talking about forage quality only. So you're looking at TDNs and ADF, any of those components you're looking for feed. It does have a parent in it that we have I've put together as a genetic pool to bring in quality. So and I'm not going to talk about pedigrees and what these are because you're not going to know any of the lines that are in any of these. So, but this one actually has a background that has really good high quality. Among all the springs, this is the highest quality variety we have. Do you want to say anything about Surge, or are you good?
I guess, yeah, on Surge, one more thing. So Surge, our first year selling Surge was this spring. So this is our second year growing seed for Surge. It's new to us. I think the lodging will be a challenge under higher fertility customers. So just getting that management around there, and then figuring out the right seeding rates is going to be something we have to sort out a little bit as well. But yeah, facultative, that was new to me, like how that worked. On how that is. So.
Yeah, and just real quick on the seeding rates, it's going to be tough, especially if you had an environment where you have a lot of really good fertility in the soil already and some decent water. But you're going to always recommend, I have to do the backwards math here, but 1.2 million plants per acre is what I use for recommendation. And as we move towards the east in the U.S., those guys jumped up to about 1.6, 1.7, which is about what this one is planted at roughly. So if you're... And in the U.S., most of our customers they're cheap. I mean, they are cheap dudes, and they will not put a PGR on even if it pays for itself in the long run. They just won't do it. So we're trying to get straw strength back into them. Again, to get straw strength, you got to shorten the internode of that plant. So you can't always have these big giant tall, heavy yielding varieties without trying to shorten that internode so it has some straw strength to stand up. So that's where the increased tillering comes to make up for lost yield and high.
Actually, this crop, for those of you on the tour last year, we lost Martin Shields for a few moments in the crop, but it was this high, like it was shoulder high on me, and we did 1 PGR. It was on the field just over there. But yeah, the Surge was here last year in our field on the tour last year. With 1 PGR, and it was going down. So,
and I want to stand up here and tell you everything to do to this crop, but every environment's different. You're probably my adversary on this about helping me find what the right seeding rate is. So we're always kind of lean on Greg. Is like, what did you find that worked best for this area? I can give you an idea what I think will work, but sometimes that's not the right answer. So I'm learning as well coming up here.
yeah, come on forward so in front of these ones a little bit, and then.
Yeah. Hybrid surge. Yeah. All right, moving forward, this variety to my right is actually hybrid surge. We're in the I would say the infantile stages of developing hybrid triticales. We've kind of gone down the road of figuring out what the best way. There's a lot of ways you can approach developing hybrids, small grains, but I worked for Syngenta for 5 years or so, and we were working on hybrid wheats. And somebody's recording, aren't you? You may bleep this part out.
You want to pause?
No, it's fine. I'm just kidding. When I worked on hybrid wheats, I didn't see anywhere from a 3 to 6% improvement over what the conventional ones. And this is grain wheat, not forage wheat. And you kind of scratch your head thinking like, to the amount of investment it takes to create a hybrid and how hard it is for the production side, so on and so forth. Why would we develop hybrids if we can't get more yield than that? over the conventional lines. But what we did along the way was kind of started messing around with trit a little bit, and then we found out was we could actually get 15 to 20% boost in biomass production from a hybrid, and that became pretty interesting to us. So we thought, let's see what we can do moving forward. So the first thing we did was we actually had some cytoplasmic male sterile genetics in the background of some trits already from a former program that we bought, and so we actually stabilized that, put it in a spring background first, just because spring's faster. You can move genetics in the springs significantly faster than you can in winters. The whole vernalization thing I was talking about. And then we started making top crosses. And honestly, when you start making top crosses, you can manually make those crosses, hybrid crosses in the greenhouse all day. But if you can't make it in the field, there's no reason to even try to mess with it. So it took us about 4 years to start figuring out which pollen donors that we could use to make hybrids with. And if y'all want to come in here later, you don't have to right now, but you'll see this head on this particular variety is gaping significantly right now. That's because it's not being pollinated like some of the other ones are starting to get pollinated. It's actually looking for pollen right now. It's opening up and trying to do what Mother Nature taught it to do, was to get pollinated to set seed so you can move on to the next generation. So all our current hybrids are male sterile, so they will not produce seed when they head out. We did that for one main reason was the area that we were adapting our first hybrids in, they're a flag leaf to a boot stage cut. So we don't need seed at that stage. We don't care if it produces seed. At that stage, that's where they're all cutting them. You're really focused on biomass. So as we kind of move things up here, traditionally you guys are cutting the milk stage to soft dough. So, there's a problem. And the problem is not necessarily with not producing seed, is with what else gets inside of that gloom that you don't want, and that's an ergot issue. And you can have a major ergot issue with this line if it sets out here much longer without being pollinated. So what we're actually looking at, I have some restoration lines that I'm going to use now that I can put cross on top, and that hybrid will be a seed producing hybrid. Pretty simple. The restoration side's a little easier than the male sterile side, so I can make that happen a little quicker. But what we've seen with the hybrids is predominantly the hybrids are spring right now with spring backgrounds, because of the female is a true spring, and you make a hybrid out of those two, you only get half as much winter tolerance. So that's kind of what we're working towards. This is hybrid surge, so that surge is the pollinator to create this hybrid. And you'll see it actually it cuts off the maturity a little bit, makes it a little earlier, and that's true for a lot of our hybrids that because of the male sterile that we're using, the female that we're using is a really early maturing line. So kind of making that nick, it's actually shaving a lot of maturity off of them and changing them a lot. Additionally, where we see the advantages for the hybrids is actually not in the high irrigated, high fertility, all the great things that you could throw at it. It's actually in the low fertility, low water, high stress environments, because we actually see them, that hybrid vigor kind of kicks in, and with those abiotic stresses, and that variety usually outperforms most of our conventional lines. And we see it really in the environments where some of the guys, it's so tough. They're like, if we get something great, if we don't. But then there's a seed cost that's a little higher on hybrids than it is. So as we kind of move through the process, again, we're in my opinion, we're in the infantile stage moving forward. So this is kind of something we're looking at. I have some true winter hybrids that are just knock your socks off, but there's a lodging issue we got to deal with in certain environments. Any questions about hybrid?
PGRs, that'll solve it.
Yeah, I like producers that don't mind spending money, because they're a lot easier to work with. Okay, this Triticale doesn't look so good. This is and I don't know if could have been a communication error, or maybe I secretly ignored this and wanted you to plant it anyhow.
Yeah, I'm thinking you guys told me to put this in here.
Yeah, I don't remember what anyhow, this is just a good example of vernalization requirement. This is Gainer, and we'll talk about Gainer a little bit at the their fall plant ones, right? There'll be a strip of gainer to look at. It's a true winter, has a very high vernalization requirement. This is what it looks like. Just like he talked about the winters when you plant them in the rows, perform the same way because it has a high vernalization requirement. This is a true winter. We've grown this one in Canada for about 4 years now, I believe, and we've had a lot of success with it. It was also one of our first really high cold tolerant varieties. The only issue with it, it's a fully bearded variety or fully on. If you're chopping it, that shouldn't matter, but there's a whole conversation around that piece.
Greg, does that have enough oomph then to seed it in the spring, raise it, and let it go for grain next winter or next?
No. Every time that's the disadvantage for me to have the conversations because I've done this a couple times not knowing. Usually what'll happen is it'll run out of gas here in about it might last another 30-45 days, but it would eventually just run out of gas and it'll start basically killing itself. It'll look really yellow, and it almost get to the point where it'll turn so yellow you think you've sprayed it with a herbicide. So I haven't ever seen anybody be successful with it. I would love for that to happen because that's a whole different market I could go after. This is hybrid. So I talked about flex. We didn't have that one. That's probably on me. I'll be honest with you, that was probably supposed to be hybrid or flex itself, and I accidentally put gainer in it, whatever the case may be. But flex, again, I talked about is our facultative trid that has the highest cold tolerance of any facultative I've had advantage of working with. This is hybrid flex, so this is using flex as that pollen donor. It doesn't have the cold tolerance. Again, like all our hybrids, they just don't have the cold tolerance to be this far north as far as the fall planting goes, but it does pretty well in this for spring production. You also see the leaf character on these hybrids. There's a lot wider leaf, longer leaf. There's a higher leaf to stem rush ratio when I make those crosses or make those hybrids. That's one of the big advantages to moving into a hybrid system. Anything that's usually anything that's good from the donor plant, I can actually make that a little bit better in the actual hybrid. Doesn't always work, but it's been pretty successful. And then next to me is hybrid gainer. Again, gainer, which is not vernalized. The pollinator for this one. The only reason I can actually make this nick is because gainer is the earliest winter triticale I've ever seen on the market. It's usually about 2 weeks earlier than any other trit in the United States fall planted. It's incredibly early. It's got a lot of weird stuff in the background. It's got a lot of cement background in it, and that we talked about earlier. You heard about some of the trits on the end, so there's a lot of weird stuff in the background that kind of makes it unique. But this is just another example. This one's probably not going. You're probably never going to see this one again. I just don't think there's any advantage for this one here. Oh, and then
I thought this was going to head out actually.
yeah. Oh, 209's another true winter. We'll see it in the fall planted plots, but again, just another true winter that just a good example of vernalization requirement. It has to have that cold tolerance to reproduce.
Any questions for Racy?
Greg, what date was this seeded, and then so what stage is it at?
It was around May 27th. Yeah, so seeded pretty late, around May 27th. I would have liked to have been 2 or 3 weeks earlier.
So is this more frost tolerant than barley, or?
Oh, is it winter crop?
Yeah, no, as far as seeding early in the spring.
Oh, seeding early. I don't know if I would have good information as far as frost tolerance for seeding early.
How early?
Like
Frozen
0
soil.
degrees
Frozen
Celsius.
soil. I got you. Like you're planting through the snow, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I have had some guys in Montana frost seed surge because it does have some cold tolerances to it, and it doesn't seem to have any dormancy issues either. So frost seeding it in Montana, it has been successful. again, we're not Montana here, but it is as close as I can get you about.
No, I'm not talking frost seeded. I'm more just like, maybe mid.
Oh, just taking a frost in May that would hurt a barley or something.
Yeah.
Okay. If you had a frost on the crop.
Oh, so like if it's already up and growing? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because this one's grown. Let's see, I think the furthest I've taken surge that's successful is in Nebraska, and they get down, they get cold. They still get pretty cold in Nebraska, and it's fall planted, and we've still got a lot of tonnage off of it. It doesn't seem to hurt it as much. Again, I don't know how late some of your early freezes are, but if it's already elongating, you're going to have some issues there because it can hurt the growing points out of the crown and starting to move above the soil. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because that one's actually that's a pretty significant grazer for us in the plains too, because a lot of the guys like to use it to graze wheat pasture cattle all throughout the fall and winter.
Are the hybrid seed like more expensive than the normal Triticale?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
The question. Repeat the question.
So he asks, is the hybrid seed more expensive than conventional? Yes, because and it's not because we found a way to try to make more money and jab people for more money, but it's because it's expensive to produce. It's just all about production costs, so it's more expensive to produce a hybrid. Basically, it'll make a hybrid. I don't know if you'll have hybrid Sudans and sorghum Sudans and things like that up here. Okay, so for hybrid production, you have to plant the female in a strip, then a male alternate, and you let wind pollinate them. That takes up a pretty significant amount of the field, and it takes down the amount of production you could use because you're only using, a half of the field or 2/3 of the field for actual seed production. So it's an extra expense, and it's technology.
Racy will talk in the fall crop plots. He's got the 3 varieties there as well. So, any other questions right now? Okay. Thanks, Racy. We'll get you speaking at the end of our fall crop session. So, for those that arrived a little later, the plan for the day, it's probably getting closer to noon. I think Lauren, I think whenever the food is ready, we'll probably just eat, but we'll be in the tent talking winter wheats, and when the food's ready, we can pause and eat when it's warm. So that'd be the plan. So for the day today, we're going to look at this marrow fat pea real quick and then walk back. And then we're going to look at the winter crops and do kind of just a very shortened version of what we did for our fall crop tour. So we'll kind of move through the winter crops a lot faster. And then we'll have lunch somewhere in there. And we'll hear from Mike Harding on diseases. Then we'll talk some faba beans about the fabel behind us from Drew and Haley from those potential buyers. And then we're going to look at the pea plots over there, the 6 varieties of yellow peas. And then on the far side, we're going to walk down and look at some oats and some double replanting for double crops of sorghum, barley, and oats for double crop planting after a fall rye would be silage. So let's just walk and look at these marrow fat peas for 2 seconds, and then we'll head back.